The metal bench at the bus stop felt like a block of ice pressed against Aaliyah Carter's back. She was used to long shifts at 26 years old, but this one had pushed her body past its limit. Her thin scrub jacket, the pale blue one issued by the county hospital, did nothing to keep the winter night from sinking into her bones. She pulled it tighter anyway, her dark hands trembling, teeth chattering as another gust of frigid wind clawed across the deserted street. It was 2:30 in the morning. The digital display above the shelter flickered, announcing that the next bus wouldn't arrive for another 58 minutes in eternity. The city around her seemed dead at this hour. Only the occasional car sped by headlights, slicing through the snow before disappearing again. Each sound echoed like a reminder of how utterly alone she was. Her heart hammered harder as she checked her pockets for the third time in 10 minutes. Empty. She already knew it, but some foolish hope had driven her to check again. Her wallet was gone. Her phone was gone. Even the $20 bill she always folded in the sole of her shoe for emergencies was missing. She had been robbed at the hospital of all places. During her short break, exhaustion had overtaken her, and she dozed off in the staff lounge chair. When she woke, everything she owned was gone. She sat there now, 26 years old, her dark brown skin ashen from cold, her curly hair pulled back in a bun that had loosened during her 14-hour shift. Her shoes were worn thin from double shifts at multiple jobs, and every muscle in her legs screamed in protest. She had been covering for another nurse, and though the overtime pay would help with her grandmother's medical bills, it wasn't helping her survive this night. The bus stop's glass walls rattled as the wind howled through the street. Her breath came out in white puffs that lingered before fading into nothing. She rubbed her hands together, trying to summon warmth, but her fingers were numb. She wasn't sure how much longer she could last. Her grandmother Dorothy would be awake soon, probably worried already. Dorothy was 73 years old, strong-willed, despite her diabetes and heart issues, and she had raised Aaliyah since she was 8. The thought of her grandmother waiting by the window, wondering why she hadn't come home yet, stabbed deeper than the cold. A pair of headlights swept across the shelter, drawing Aaliyah from her thoughts. A sleek black car slowed as it approached, its engine purring with quiet power. Her muscles stiffened, and instinct told her to stay alert. Women on night shifts were warned countless times never get into a stranger's car. The vehicle rolled to a smooth stop at the curb. Through the passenger window, she saw a man lean forward. The tinted glass lowered with a soft hum, and a wave of warm air drifted out into the icy night. "Excuse me," the driver called, his voice deep but gentle. "Are you okay? You look like you're freezing." Aaliyah hesitated, every warning bell in her head clanging. But her body betrayed her. She shivered violently, wrapping her arms tighter around herself. Her voice shook when she answered, "I'm fine, thank you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. The man studied her face with concern. Even from her seat on the frozen bench, she could see he was in his early 30s, perhaps 32 or 33. His skin was pale against the car's dark interior. His hair, a deep brown, neatly styled. He wore a tailored black coat that looked expensive without trying. His eyes, clear blue, almost startling against the shadows, did not hold the predatory gleam she had learned to watch for during her years of working night shifts. Instead, they seemed to radiate something else: sincerity. "It's below freezing," he said softly, his tone steady, careful. "And it's almost 3 in the morning. When's your next bus?" She wanted to tell him nothing to keep him from knowing how vulnerable she was. But the cold was winning, clouding her thoughts. "An hour," she muttered finally. He exhaled sharply, clearly troubled. "An hour. You'll get hypothermia before then. Please let me give you a ride. I can see you're a nurse. I'm not some random guy looking for trouble." Aaliyah's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed no, but her hands had gone so numb she could barely move them. and her legs felt like they would give out if she stood. Her strength was slipping fast. She whispered, "I don't even know you," but her voice lacked conviction. He reached into his coat slowly, carefully, and withdrew a small rectangle. He pressed it against the window glass, where she could see it. A business card. Ethan Callahan, CEO. Callahan Technologies. "My name is Ethan Callahan," he said calmly. "I was heading home from a late meeting downtown when I saw you. You can call the police right now. They can verify who I am or even follow us. But please don't stay out here like this." Aaliyah blinked at the card, her breath coming in shallow bursts. She had heard of Callahan Technologies. It was one of the largest employers in the city, the kind of company people read about in news articles but never encountered in their daily lives. And the name Ethan Callahan sounded familiar. Wasn't he, the one known for his philanthropy projects, the CEO who donated to hospitals and schools? Still, trust didn't come easily, not in her world. But another gust of wind tore through her thin jacket, and her body's trembling reached a dangerous level. She could feel herself weakening. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice small and defensive. "Why stop for me?" Ethan was quiet for a beat, his hands resting on the steering wheel. When he spoke, his voice carried something deeper than courtesy. "Because my mother was a nurse. She worked nights for years, often waiting at bus stops just like this. She always said people like her, like you, kept the city running while everyone else slept. She taught me that if you see someone like that in need, you don't just drive by." The words struck something in her, an ache buried beneath years of exhaustion and suspicion. Her grandmother had taught her the same: trust your instincts about people. And right now, despite every warning, her instincts whispered that Ethan Callahan was telling the truth. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her she hadn't eaten since her lunch break more than 12 hours ago. Her entire body shook with fatigue. Sitting in that warm car was no longer just tempting. It was survival. Ethan's eyes softened, as if sensing her inner battle. "There's a 24-hour diner 10 minutes from here. I'll take you there first if you'd like. You can get warm, eat, and call your family from my phone. No pressure, just safety." The word safety echoed inside her chest. Aaliyah stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. Her reflection in the car's window startled her. A young black woman with tired eyes, natural hair escaping her bun cheeks, pale with cold. She looked fragile, and she hated looking fragile. But she opened the door anyway, as the warmth wrapped around her, seeping into her frozen body. Aaliyah Carter, a 26-year-old nurse who had spent years surviving through grit and sacrifice, realized her life had just taken a turn she could never have predicted. And though she didn't know it yet, this decision, born of desperation and instinct, would lead her into danger, trust, and a love that would change everything. The heat in the car kept climbing, thawing her fingers one ache at a time. Aaliyah let the vents breathe over her palms until the pins and needles settled into something like comfort. Ethan drove without filling the silence, letting the wipers whisper across the windshield. City lights slid by in smears of yellow and blue. "If you want, we can keep the windows cracked," he said. "Sometimes going from freezing to a sauna makes people dizzy." "I'm fine," she answered, surprised to find she meant it. "Thank you for stopping." He nodded once, as if gratitude made him shy, and turned into the glow of a neon sign, "Ales all night." The diner crouched on the corner, like a warm memory fogged windows, red vinyl booths, a bell on the door that promised company. Inside, a waitress with a silver ponytail waved them to a booth beneath a framed photo of a baseball team from 2 decades ago. The air smelled of coffee butter and something sweet on the griddle. Aaliyah slid onto the bench near the aisle facing the door. Habit. Ethan took the opposite seat without comment. "Coffee?" the waitress asked, pen already poised. "Please," Aaliyah said. And a hot tea for me, Ethan added. Honey and lemon, if you have it. The bell chimed again behind them. A gust of cold air carried in a man in a beanie who headed for the counter. Aaliyah's shoulders eased. Ethan set his business card on the table, not as a boast, but as a reference letter between strangers. You can use my phone, he said, sliding it across. There's a passcode, but I'll punch it in. Call whoever you need. Or the police station. Whatever makes this less weird. It is weird, she said, almost smiling, but in a good way. When the phone lit, she hesitated. Not because she didn't know who to call, but because her grandmother would hear the truth in her voice. She dialed anyway. It rang twice. Gram, it's me. Oh, thank God. Relief cracked Dorothy's words. I've been staring at that porch light like it would bring you home. Where are you? In a diner, Aaliyah said, keeping her tone steady. I lost my phone at work and missed the last bus. Someone gave me a ride. His name is Ethan. He's safe. She met his gaze across the table and found no flinch, only a quiet attentiveness. I'll be home after I eat. Lock the door. Okay. Already locked twice. Bring me a story when you get here, Dorothy said, then added in a lower voice, and keep your eyes open, always. Aaliyah ended the call and exhaled. The waitress returned with mugs and set down a small plate of buttered toast to warm up from the inside. Aaliyah didn't argue. The first bite unraveled the tight knot below her ribs. What happened? Ethan asked gently, not prying so much as offering a container to pour into. I fell asleep during my break. Someone helped themselves to everything. Wallet, phone, bus pass. She swallowed, then took a sip of coffee strong enough to stand up. It's been a week. No, a year of double shifts. I could do one more. That part's on me. Getting robbed is never on you, he said low and firm. He didn't push the point. Turkey club and a bowl of chicken noodle. You don't have to. I know. He lifted a hand toward the waitress and mouthed the order. Consider it a rescue tax. The smallest laugh escaped her. Is that a thing? It should be. They ate in the kind of silence that doesn't demand apology. Utensils clinking softly, the hiss of the kitchen, the murmur of the radio playing something Motown and bright. When they finally spoke, it felt like stepping into warm water. My grandmother's on a dozen medications, Aaliyah said. Too many, really. Insurance covers some. The rest is me clinics, home care shifts I can grab. I tell myself it's temporary. Temporary can stretch, he said. He wrapped his hands around his tea as if absorbing steadiness. My dad, he's at a memory care facility. Some days he knows me. Some days he thinks I'm there to fix the air conditioner. I visit anyway. It helps to pretend he remembers, even when he doesn't. The words landed between them and stayed. Aaliyah watched his posture change, some small pull inward, and felt the impulse to reach across the table. She didn't. She asked, what was he like before? Funny, Ethan said. Not loud about it. Quiet jokes that made you feel chosen when you got them. He used to say, every problem was just a puzzle we hadn't solved yet. Lately I've been short on solutions. Maybe not, she said. You solved the problem of a freezing stranger. His mouth tugged at one corner. That one was easy. A man at the counter dropped coins. They rattled and rolled. Aaliyah glanced toward the window, while the waitress chased them. Outside, a car idled across the street, headlights beyond the fogged glass off. In the reflection, she thought she saw a phone held chest high. When she leaned forward for a clearer look, a bus passed, smearing everything to streaks. You okay? Ethan asked. Thought I saw someone, she said, more to herself than to him. It's late. Everyone looks suspicious at this hour. Trust your gut, he said. Guts are undercredited. The waitress refilled their mugs and slid the check toward Ethan. He set his card down without glancing at the total. Aaliyah watched the small, practiced motions, competence wrapped in courtesy, and felt something shift inside her, like a latch clicking. Not yet trusted. The beginning of it. Ethan's phone buzzed on the table screen face down. The sound was more insistent than a casual text. 2 short pulses, a pause, 2 more. He tilted it toward him, read and set it aside. Unread. Work, she asked. Security, he said. They're thorough. He caught himself before he said more, then offered a rueful smile. Thorough is a polite word for paranoid. Sometimes paranoid is just well prepared, she said, thinking of fake badges and early knocks. The bell over the door chimed again. The beanie man left with a box of donuts, waving goodnight to the cook. The idling car outside pulled forward 1 parking space, then stopped. Aaliyah felt the hairs at the base of her neck lift. She swallowed the feeling and reached for her coat. I should get home, she said. Graham will pretend she fell asleep, and then tell me exactly how long the coffee pot's been on. I'll drive you, Ethan said, already standing. He didn't crowd her. He didn't insist. If you still want to call the police to tail us, we can do that too. I think. Let's go, she said, surprised herself again. But I'm giving directions and you're dropping me at the porch light. Deal. They stepped out into the night. The cold had softened a degree, or maybe the diner had built an extra layer beneath her skin. Snow dusted the sidewalk in flurries. Across the street, the idling car turned its headlights on and eased into traffic, heading in the opposite direction. It could be a coincidence. Maybe not. Ethan unlocked the passenger door and waited, posture careful. She slid in, buckled up, and watched the diner shrink in the side mirror as they pulled away. For a stretch, they said nothing. The city had that bleary between hours look, bar signs, dimming delivery trucks yawning awake. Can I ask something? Aaliyah said finally. Anything, he answered, and it sounded like he meant it. When you stopped, were you scared I'd yell at you, or that I'd think you had an angle? Both, he said, with a breath of wry honesty. And that I'd say the wrong thing and make it worse. But I kept thinking about my mom freezing, waiting for a bus that never came, and all the times I wished someone had pulled over for her. She smiled at the windshield. You don't sound like a CEO. I try not to after midnight. He followed her directions through a patchwork of quiet neighborhoods and shuttered storefronts. When they hit a red light, he glanced over. If you want, I can swing by a 24-hour pharmacy, replace a transit card, a charger, something to make tomorrow less of a mess. That's kind, she said. Let me see what the damage looks like in daylight. For now, get me to the porch. They turned down her street. The houses here were small and steadfast, with porches like open arms and yards tucked under winter. The porch light she'd mentioned burned above a blue-painted door. Ethan stopped at the curb, hazards blinking softly. She unbuckled and hesitated just a breath. Thank you, she said. For the ride, for the food. I have to repay for not making it feel like a favor. It wasn't, he said. But if you ever want to repay me, tell me about your favorite dinner pie. That's the sort of debt I keep track of. Pecan, she said, the answer rising, before pride could stop it. Dangerous choice, he said lightly. Noted. She opened the door, then paused again. The street was quiet, but not empty. Up the block, a dark sedan sat beneath a skeletal maple tree. The engine was off. The driver didn't move. The windshield reflected only the porch lights and stars. Aaliyah stepped out, pulled her coat close, and felt the cold fold around her like a stern relative. She leaned back into the car. Can you wait until I'm inside? I was going to, he said. No theatrics. No hero posture. Just the simple thing done right. She walked up the path. At the top step, Dorothy's curtain lifted an inch and dropped. The lock clicked. Aaliyah turned the knob, stepped inside, and let the warmth swallow her. On the street, Ethan waited until the door closed, and the porch light blinked once Dorothy's old signal for "we're fine." Only then did he pull away. In the second-story window, Aaliyah stood with her palm on the glass, watching the taillights shrink and vanish. The dark sedan remained where it was patient as a shadow. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself a dozen practical things. But beneath them, something quieter spoke. Tonight had shifted the axis of her life, not with a grand gesture, but with a mug of coffee, a shared silence, and a stranger who didn't push. In the kitchen, Dorothy waited with 2 mugs and a look that combined relief and interrogation. Aaliyah set the business card on the table between them. "I'm okay," she said, and the words felt true for the first time that night. Outside, a distant engine turned over and faded into the snow. The kitchen clock ticked louder than it should have, each second a pointed reminder that the night wasn't finished testing Aaliyah. She sat at the small round table, her grandmother across from her, steam curling from 2 mugs of chamomile tea. The house smelled faintly of lemon polish and the vanilla candle Dorothy always lit when she worried. Tonight, the wick burned low, the flame restless. Dorothy pushed the business card back across the table with one careful finger. Men with cars like that don't stop for stranded girls at bus stops unless they want something. I've been alive long enough to know. He didn't want anything, Aaliyah said softly. He just helped. That's all. Dorothy's sharp eyes studied her granddaughter's face, searching for cracks. Maybe. But good intentions don't keep wolves from the door. Don't mistake courtesy for character, baby. Aaliyah wrapped her hands around the mug. I didn't have a choice. It was him or an hour in the cold. I was shaking so bad I could barely stand. And I'm glad you're safe, Dorothy said, her voice softening. She reached across the table, squeezing Aaliyah's hand. But safety isn't just about warmth. Sometimes danger wears a fine coat and a smile. The old wall heater clicked on with a hollow thump. Aaliyah exhaled, staring at the shadows the candlelight cast across the ceiling. She wanted to believe Ethan's kindness was simple, but her grandmother's words had roots. Sleep came in snatches. She tossed on her narrow bed, the night's events replaying, until dawn's gray crept across the curtains. When she finally rose, her body felt leaden, but there was no time to recover. She dressed quickly, packed her bag, and moved to the kitchen, where Dorothy was already setting out morning pills in neat rows. Eat something, Dorothy said. I'll grab something at the clinic. Aaliyah kissed her grandmother's cheek, but the tension from the night before lingered between them like a closed door. She stepped out into the brisk morning. Frost clung to the porch railings, and her breath clouded instantly. The street looked ordinary in daylight, children's bikes on porches, a dog barking 2 houses down. But the black sedan she'd noticed last night was gone, and its absence left a hollow echo. By the time her shift ended, exhaustion had settled like a permanent weight. She trudged home through the afternoon chill, eager for quiet. But quiet wasn't what she found. Dorothy stood at the window curtain drawn halfway aside. There's a man outside, she murmured without looking away. Aaliyah's pulse jumped. Where? On the porch. Dorothy let the curtain fall, knocking like he owns the place. A heavy rap sounded against the front door, deliberate and steady. Aaliyah moved cautiously, peering through the peephole. A man in a dark coat stood on the stoop, middle-aged, clean-shaven, an ordinary face that would have blended into any downtown office crowd. But there was something too still about how he held himself, as if waiting for a signal. Can I help you? Aaliyah called through the door. The man pulled a badge from his coat and held it up. Detective Morrison, he said evenly. I have some questions about a robbery in this neighborhood. I understand you were a victim last night. Her heart lurched. How could he know already? She hadn't even filed a formal report, only mentioned it when uniformed officers responded at the bus stop. I don't recall scheduling an interview, she said carefully. This won't take long, Morrison replied. Just need to verify a few details. Best if we talk inside. Dorothy stepped closer, shaking her head firmly. Don't open that door. Aaliyah swallowed. May I see your identification more clearly? He pressed the badge against the glass. It looked real enough from the distorted peephole view, but the small print blurred the seal half hidden by reflection. Aaliyah said, I'm late for work. Her voice louder than she felt. If you're a real police officer, you can contact me through official channels. There was a pause. Then footsteps moved away from the porch. After several minutes of silence, she dared to peek through the blinds. The man was gone, but a dark sedan now idled across the street parked where the one had been the night before. Her stomach tightened. Dorothy said we're calling the station, already reaching for the real station phone. 2 uniformed officers arrived 20 minutes later, their marked cruiser pulling to the curb with lights off. They checked their IDs twice, letting Aaliyah study them closely. Officer Ramos, the younger of the 2, listened carefully as she explained the encounter. No detectives assigned to your robbery yet, he confirmed, and we wouldn't send someone to your house without notice. This man wasn't one of ours. Then who was he? Dorothy asked, her voice sharp. Hard to say. But you did the right thing not to open the door, Ramos said. We'll increase patrols around the neighborhood. Until we figure out what he wanted, stay alert. Is there somewhere safe she can go for a while? The older officer asked gently. Aaliyah hesitated. A single name leapt forward before she could stop it. Ethan Callahan. His offer at the diner returned as he had slid the card toward her, steady and sure. Maybe, she said quietly. Someone I met last night. He offered help. Dorothy shot her a look that held both warning and reluctant recognition. The world had grown dangerous quickly, and options were thin. After the police left, silence pressed heavily against the walls. Aaliyah sat at the table, card in hand, tracing the embossed letters with her thumb. You're thinking about calling him Dorothy, said, arms folded. He needs to know someone's watching us. Because of him, Aaliyah replied. If he's in danger too, or if he's the danger, Dorothy countered. He's not. The certainty in Aaliyah's voice surprised even her. Dorothy studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Sometimes desperation clouds judgment. But I trust you know yourself better than I do. Just be careful. With trembling fingers, Aaliyah dialed the number etched into the card. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, calm and firm. Ethan Callahan. She swallowed. It's Aaliyah. From last night. A beat of silence, then warmth. I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon. Her words tumbled out fast. Someone came to my house this morning pretending to be a detective. The real police say it wasn't one of theirs. They think it might be connected to you. And now there's a car watching our street. The line went still. Then Ethan's voice came, edged with urgency. Are you and your grandmother safe right now? For now. But no, he cut in firmly, not unkindly. You're not safe if someone followed us from last night. I'm coming to get you, both of you. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. If this is about me, then you're in danger because of me. I won't leave you to face that alone. She looked across the table at Dorothy, who was already packing pills into a travel case. Her face stern, but eyes resigned. You sure about this? Dorothy asked. No, Aaliyah admitted, pressing the phone tighter to her ear. But staying here isn't safe either. Ethan's voice softened, steady as stone. Pack a bag. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The line clicked dead. Aaliyah lowered the phone, heart racing. Her grandmother's voice cut through the storm inside her. "Well," Dorothy said, snapping the case shut. "Looks like we're about to find out if this man is a savior or the start of more trouble." Outside, across the street, the dark sedan waited, its windows tinted, its engine off. Whoever sat inside did not move, but Aaliyah could feel their gaze like frost crawling down her spine. And somewhere deep inside, she knew life had shifted again, and there was no going back. The knock came exactly 30 minutes later. Not a frantic pounding or careless tap, 3 firm raps that carried certainty. Aaliyah stood frozen in the hallway, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder, while Dorothy hovered by the kitchen doorway, with her arms crossed, suspicion etched into her every line. Through the peephole, Aaliyah saw Ethan Callahan. This time he wore a dark wool coat, his expression alert but steady, scanning the street before he leaned toward the door. She opened it just a crack, the chain still fastened. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but laced with tension. "Are you ready?" Dorothy's voice carried from the kitchen. "Ready for what?" "To step into someone else's fire." Ethan caught the tone, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he straightened slightly, hands visible. "Mrs. Carter, I apologize for bringing trouble to your doorstep. I'm here to ensure both of you stay safe until we understand what's happening." "Kind eyes don't make a type, man," Dorothy replied sharply, approaching the door. "How do I know you aren't the one we need protection from?" He reached into his coat pocket, slowly withdrawing his phone. "You don't. Not yet. But I can give you the number of the detective handling my case. You can call her right now and ask who I am. Or you can call my security company, they'll verify everything." Dorothy studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Finally, she glanced at Aaliyah. "You trust him?" Aaliyah swallowed, her chest tightening. "I do." Dorothy sighed, unhooked the chain, and opened the door. "Then let's see where this ride takes us." Ethan stepped inside just long enough to help with their bags. SUVs out front, less noticeable than last night's car. His tone was clipped practical. He didn't waste words. They followed him out. The morning air bit at their faces sharper now that the sun had risen. Parked half a block away, the same dark sedan waited. Its engine was off, but there was no mistaking the figure sitting behind the wheel. Ethan's gaze flicked toward it, jaw tightening. "Into the car," he said softly. He held the passenger door for Dorothy, then guided Aaliyah into the back seat before sliding into the driver's side. The SUV's engine hummed to life, smooth and quiet. As they pulled away, Aaliyah risked a glance through the rear window. The sedan stirred, headlights flicking on, and rolled after them. "They're following us," she whispered. "I know," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, but his hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Don't worry, we'll lose them." For 20 minutes, he wove through the city with practiced precision. He doubled back on one-way streets, ducked into parking garages, and used side alleys to confuse their tail. At one point, he slowed behind a delivery truck, then abruptly turned down a narrow lane that spilled into a different avenue. The sedan struggled to keep pace, growing smaller in the distance, until it disappeared entirely. "Where did you learn to drive like that?" Dorothy asked, her tone grudgingly impressed. "Defensive driving courses," Ethan answered. "Part of the job is when threats start feeling real." Dorothy pressed her lips together, but said nothing more. Aaliyah leaned back against the seat, her heart still racing. "This isn't just about me being robbed." "No." Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. "It's about me. My company has been developing technology that's valuable, too valuable. Competitors want it, and some don't care how they get it. Blackwell Industries especially. They've been pushing me to sell for months. Blackwell Aaliyah repeated quietly. She remembered the name from headlines, rumors of ruthless acquisitions and lawsuits buried in red tape. They play dirty. Ethan said hacking bribes, intimidation. Last year someone broke into my office looking for documents. I upgraded security, but they've escalated since then. So they saw us together. Aaliyah realized and thought you cared enough to use me as leverage. His glance in the rearview mirror met hers briefly, steadily. Exactly. And I am sorry, Aaliyah. You didn't ask for this. But now that they've made you a target, the safest place for you and your grandmother is with me. The SUV turned onto a tree-lined street. The houses here elegant, but lived in. When Ethan pulled into the driveway of a colonial-style home with white shutters and a broad porch, Aaliyah blinked. She had imagined a mansion gleaming and sterile. Instead, the house looked warm, even modest, the kind of place built for family, not show. "This is where you live?" Dorothy asked skeptically. "It's my parents' house," Ethan said. "I could afford bigger, but this is home." Inside the house confirmed the impression: soft blue walls framed family photos on the mantel, a quilt draped over the back of the sofa. It smelled faintly of cedar and fresh bread. Dorothy ran her hand over the quilt. "Your mother decorated this." "Most of it," Ethan replied. "She said a house should feel like a hug when you walk through the door." Dorothy's sharp eyes softened for just a second. Ethan carried the bags into the foyer. "Guest rooms on the first floor for you, Mrs. Carter. Aaliyah, your room's upstairs. Make yourselves comfortable. You'll be safe here." "Safe," Dorothy repeated under her breath, as if testing the word. Aaliyah followed Ethan into the kitchen, where sunlight streamed through expansive windows. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Yes, I did." He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You saved me last night, whether you realize it or not. If I'd driven past that bus stop, I'd be replaying it in my head for weeks. Have you made it home alive? Now at least I know you're safe." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but the truth was undeniable. She was safer here than in her small house, with a sedan watching across the street. Ethan hesitated, then continued, his voice quieter. "I also meant what I said about the job. My father needs a private nurse. The facility is excellent, but he deserves more one-on-one attention. Someone patient, compassionate, someone like you." Aaliyah blinked, caught off guard. "You barely know me." "I've seen enough," he said. "The way you spoke about your grandmother. The way you've worked yourself to exhaustion to take care of her. That kind of dedication can't be faked. It's what my father needs most." Before she could respond, Dorothy appeared in the doorway, arms folded, but expression less sharp than before. "What exactly would this job involve?" she asked. "Spending time with him," Ethan said. "Reading, helping with therapy exercises, and keeping him calm. You wouldn't be alone. There's staff at the facility. But he needs more than staff. He needs a human connection." Dorothy studied him for a long moment, then turned to Aaliyah. "It sounds like work you already do." Aaliyah's pulse quickened. The offer was tempting: more money, fewer jobs, time to spend with her grandmother. Yet it also felt like stepping deeper into Ethan's world, a world already proving dangerous. Ethan must have sensed her hesitation because his voice softened. "I don't want an answer today. Think about it. For now, let's focus on keeping you safe." A knock at the front door broke the moment. Not polite this time, sharp, insistent. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He moved to the window and pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. A sleek black town car sat at the curb. Two men in tailored suits stood on the porch, their expressions hard. Blackwell Ethan muttered. His voice dropped lower, cold as steel. "They're getting bold." Dorothy's jaw set. "Then we'll see if your house feels like a hug when the wolves knock." Ethan didn't open the door all the way. He unlatched the deadbolt, kept the chain on, and spoke through the gap, with the calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "State your business." The taller of the two men produced a card and held it up to the sliver of light. "Victor Hale, outside counsel to Blackwell Industries. This is Mr. Lang. We're here at the request of Mr. Richard Blackwell." Half hidden behind the staircase newel, Dorothy whispered, "Lawyers at a front door are never social." Aaliyah stood just behind Ethan's shoulder, back pressed to the cool wall. She slipped her phone camera to video angled down enough to catch shoes and trouser hems, then the edge of a leather briefcase scarred across one corner. The house camera above the porch already had their faces. Hers was for the little things, scuffs, a monogram, a license plate when they left. Details mattered when people pretended they didn't. "This isn't an appropriate venue," Ethan said. "Please send correspondence to my general counsel." "We did," and Hale replied smoothly, multiple times. "Mr. Blackwell asked us to extend one final courtesy, given your circumstances." His gaze flicked past the chain, as if he could see into the hall. "May we come in?" "No," Ethan said. "You can speak on the porch." A thin smile curved Hale's mouth. "As you wish. Our client remains keen to acquire Callahan Technologies' predictive platform. He's prepared to improve the offer with immediate liquidity for shareholders and protective provisions for stripping voting rights and neutering the board," Ethan said mildly. "Pass." Lang shifted his weight impatience in the crease of his jaw. "Are you refusing to engage in an offer significantly above the market? I'm refusing to engage on any offer that puts my work in Blackwell's hands." Hale's smile didn't move this time. "There are other levers, Mr. Callahan. Markets are sensitive. Partners can grow cautious. Vendors lose confidence. You will find doors shutting that used to open." Dorothy stepped forward into view before Ethan could answer. "You've traveled all this way to tell us the weather forecast. Looks like snow and vague threats." Hale's eyes flicked to her. For the first time, his tone cooled a degree. "We're trying to avoid the public unpleasantness that attends more formal remedies as a courtesy." "Courtesy is when you bring pie," Dorothy said. "This is trespass." Aaliyah watched Ethan's hands. No tremor, no tell. "You've delivered your message," he said. "Leave my property." Hale didn't flinch. He slid a thin envelope through the gap updated term sheet. "The window for acceptance is short. Mr. Blackwell is nothing if not decisive." "Noted." Ethan let the envelope fall to the entry table without looking at it. Hale took half a step back, then paused as if remembering an afterthought. "Oh, and Mr. Callahan." His voice softened until it was almost polite. "We hope your guests are settling in comfortably. Neighborhoods like yours aren't what they used to be." Aaliyah felt the words hit like ice water, a warning disguised as neighborly concern. She lifted her phone a fraction and captured the briefest reflection in the brass doorplate: men in dark wool, a town car idling at the curb, a driver watching his mirrors. Ethan didn't give them the satisfaction of a reply. He closed the door, slid the chain off, then turned the deadbolt, the extra quarter turn that made it sing. Only when their footsteps retreated did he exhale. Dorothy blew out a breath she'd been holding. "I don't like the way they said guests." "I don't like any of it," Ethan said, voice even. He picked up the envelope between two fingers, as if it might stain, and handed it to Aaliyah. "Could you photograph each page for my counsel? There's a secure upload link on my desktop. I'll open it." She nodded and followed him to the study. The room was simple: 2 tall windows, a low bookcase with thick manuals and worn paperbacks, a walnut desk cleared to a disciplined neatness. He tapped the keyboard, brought up a client portal, and stepped aside so she could work. Her hands were steady now. She flattened each sheet, shouldered the frame of the page so no glare ran across the print, and clicked the shutter. When she reached the exhibits, her eye snagged on a phrase: Post-acquisition staffing review, a euphemism that meant layoffs. She shot it twice. Good catch, Ethan murmured, following her gaze. They always couch the knives. You'd be handing them a scalpel, and your patient at the same time, she said. His eyes met hers. Gratitude there, and something like relief that he didn't have to translate his world into gentler words. Exactly. From the kitchen came the civilized rattle of Dorothy making tea, as if politeness could steady a shaken house. Aaliyah uploaded the images, watched the progress bar march toward completion, then set the pages back into the envelope and sealed it shut with a strip of painter's tape. For the chain of custody, she said. A corner of his mouth lifted. You think like a nurse and a litigator. Mostly a daughter, she said. I learned to document when people stopped believing the first time. He leaned a hip on the desk, the posture of someone who wanted to keep his distance and failed by an inch. Thank you. For thinking fast. For not panicking. I already panicked this week, she said. It's boring now. They shared a small laugh that loosened something in both of them. It would have been easy to step closer. Instead, the kettle shrieked, and they both startled like teenagers. When they returned to the kitchen, Dorothy had already set 3 cups on the table. So she said wolves with letterhead. What's next? Evidence, Aaliyah said before Ethan could answer. Document every contact, including plate numbers, times, faces, and threats. If they're careful, we need to be meticulous. Ethan nodded. Security logs everything outside. I'll pull the footage and forward it to Detective Chen. Good, Dorothy said. And you Mr. Call your lawyer and ask how fast they can get an injunction if anyone crosses the line. We play inside the lines until they don't. Then we make the referee look. Already in motion, he said. He looked at Aaliyah. And I meant what I said earlier. I don't want your answer now, but I want you to know the job offer isn't charity. It's needed. She lifted an eyebrow. Yours or your father's? Both, he said, were honest enough to risk it. It landed between them with a weight that wasn't oppressive. Aaliyah looked out the window while fighting about where snow feathered over the porch rail and tire tracks scored the street. I want to meet him today, she said at last, if the facility allows visitors on short notice. They do. Ethan said, hope threading into his voice. We can go this afternoon. Dorothy slid a cup toward Aaliyah and another toward Ethan. She said, before you run off to save the world, let's agree on a few rules. No one opens this door for strangers. No one walks to the car alone. If anything feels wrong, it isn't good. We assume everything is being watched. Already, my operating system, Ethan said. He lifted his tea as if to toast to rules. To not be foolish? Dorothy corrected, clinking her cup against his. After tea, Ethan gathered the empty cups, rinsed them, and loaded the dishwasher with precision, suggesting that he had fixed things when he couldn't fix the big stuff. Aaliyah watched the care in his hands, the way he placed a fragile mug, as if it mattered, which she realized it did. She reached for the dish towel he was about to grab, their fingers brushing for an instant. Neither of them snatched back. Neither of them made more of it. The moment sat quiet and charged, then moved on like a tide pulling away. An alert chimed softly from Ethan's phone. He checked it, jaw tightening, then turning neutral again. Security, Aaliyah asked. He nodded. The town car circled twice. Plate registered to a Shell fleet. No surprise. He set the phone face down. We're still going to the facility. Fear is their lever. We don't hand them the fulcrum. Dorothy made a satisfied noise. At last, a man who paid attention in physics. They packed light, a scarf, a notebook, and a pen, Aaliyah tucked behind her ear. At the door, she paused and glanced back at the entry table. The sealed envelope lay there, a tidy rectangle of provocation. She picked up a sticky note and wrote the date, time and names Hale and Lang. Then she added one more line the kind nurses write in charts when something matters, but doesn't fit a checkbox. Tone courteous. Content coercive. She stuck it to the envelope and looked to find Ethan watching her respectfully. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," she said. Outside, the day had sharpened into a crystalline cold. The sky was a hard, bright blue. As they climbed into the SUV, Aaliyah scanned the block. No sedan in sight. That meant nothing and everything. Ethan pulled away from the curb, eyes on the mirrors, then on the road. The house shrank in the rear view, a brave face against a gathering storm, neat and ordinary. The silence felt like a pact in the space between engine noise and tires on snow. They were no longer strangers. They were a unit under pressure, and the pressure had begun to forge something strong. The Evergreen Memory Care Center rose from the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, like a small hotel rather than a facility. Expansive windows softened its stone facade and landscaped evergreens dusted in frost. Aaliyah expected the antiseptic smell of bleach when they stepped through the glass doors, but instead, warm notes of cinnamon and pine drifted from somewhere down the hall. A receptionist in soft scrubs greeted Ethan by name, sliding a visitor's log across the counter. He signed quickly, and the woman buzzed them through. Dorothy, never one to miss details, lingered just long enough to check the receptionist's badge and clock the cameras tucked discreetly into the corners. Only when she seemed satisfied did she nod for them to continue. The hallway was lined with framed artwork, bright landscapes, family portraits donated by residents. Aaliyah slowed to study them, the way lights softened around smiling faces. She felt her chest loosen. For the first time since the knock at her front door, the air didn't feel heavy. Ethan stopped at a room near the end. The brass nameplate read, "Robert Callahan." His hand lingered on the handle before he opened the door, as if steadying himself. Inside, an older man sat in a recliner, angled toward the window. His hair had thinned to silver, but his frame was still broad shoulders, stubbornly square. He tapped a rhythm on the armrest, as if conducting a silent orchestra. When the door creaked, he turned, eyes sharp one moment, distant the next. "Hi, Dad," Ethan said softly. "I brought some friends." Robert studied them with polite curiosity. "Visitors? Don't get many of those." Ethan's mouth tightened, but he kept his tone gentle. "This is Aaliyah, and this is Dorothy." "Nurses?" Robert asked, his face brightening. "My wife was a nurse, most intelligent woman I've ever met. She could make anyone better just by walking into a room." "No, sir," Aaliyah said, pulling a chair beside him, "but I'd love to hear about her." Something in her voice seemed to draw him closer to the surface. He began to speak, halting at first, then with growing warmth. Stories of Maria's laugh, how she danced to the radio while making dinner, how she once stitched his work shirt with blue thread, because it was all she had, and he wore it proudly anyway. Ethan sat on Robert's other side, not interrupting, letting his father's words flow unchecked. His shoulders eased a fraction each time Robert mentioned Maria's name. Dorothy watched quietly from near the dresser, arms folded but eyes soft. The man's memories were fractured, but his devotion was intact. She understood that language. After a while, Robert's energy waned. His eyelids drooped and his voice thinned. "You'll forgive me," he murmured, "but sometimes I forget where I am." "That's all right," Aaliyah said. She reached gently for his hand. "Wherever you are, you're not alone." He smiled faintly, then drifted into sleep. The room settled into quiet. Outside the window, snow feathered against the glass, soft and unhurried. Ethan leaned back, releasing a breath he'd held since they arrived. "You're good with him," he said quietly. "He's a good man," Aaliyah replied. "You can feel it. That kind of kindness doesn't vanish even when memory does." Her words caught him off guard. He blinked, and for an instant, his composure cracked. Gratitude and grief mingled in his eyes. Most people don't see it. They know what's gone. I've worked with families like this, she said gently. The guilt is always the hardest. But love doesn't disappear because memory does. Dorothy spoke from the doorway. She's right, and don't underestimate what her presence did in there. He came alive talking to her. Ethan turned to Aaliyah. Would you consider doing that regularly? Spending time with him, reading, listening, just being here. The weight of his request landed. She thought of her grandmother's medication trays, the long nights balancing 3 jobs, the bone-deep exhaustion. She thought, too, of the way Robert's face had softened under her words, the way Ethan had looked at her with something close to hope. I'd want to start slowly, she said carefully, a few hours at a time, to see how he responds. Whatever you're comfortable with, Ethan said. His voice carried relief like a man offered oxygen after days underwater. They left Robert's room quietly, letting him rest. In the hallway, Aaliyah paused by a photo of children holding kites in a green field. Something about their bright faces against the blue sky caught her, and she stood longer than she meant to. You all right? Ethan asked. I was thinking, she said. Sometimes life feels like the wind. You're running, but never sure if it's carrying you or knocking you down. He gave a small smile. Maybe both. Dorothy clucked softly. Either way, you keep running. That's the trick. They walked back through the lobby, the receptionist offering a warm smile, as if nothing outside these walls could threaten them. But the moment they stepped into the cold air, reality returned. Parked across the street, partly hidden behind a delivery van, sat the same dark sedan. Its engine idled low, the driver's silhouette still as a carving. Ethan's jaw set. They don't even bother hiding anymore. Aaliyah felt her pulse spike, but she forced her voice steady. Then it's time to stop pretending this is random. They followed us here. That's not intimidation, it's escalation. Dorothy folded her arms. So what's your move, Mr. Callahan? Keep ducking, or take the fight back to them? Ethan's eyes flicked to the sedan and the woman beside him. We'll talk at the house. But you're right. This isn't just harassment anymore. It's leverage, and I won't let them use you as pawns. The drive back was quiet. Snow hissed under the tires, the city slipping by in shades of gray. Aaliyah stared out the window, watching the sedan tail them for 3 blocks before it turned off. She pressed her hand against the glass, more for grounding than warmth. A decision was forming inside her, not entirely shaped, but inevitable. She had spent years surviving on her own grit, never relying on anyone. Yet here she was, sitting in a stranger's SUV, carrying her grandmother's safety and her own future in a balance she could no longer control. She exhaled slowly. Sometimes control wasn't survival. Sometimes trust was. By the time they pulled into Ethan's driveway, snowflakes had thickened into a steady fall, blurring the world's edges. Dorothy gathered her bag, muttering about hot tea and steady chairs. Aaliyah lingered longer, gazing at Ethan's profile as he shut off the engine. You weren't wrong, she said quietly. About what? Needing someone. Not just your father. You. He turned to her eyes, meeting hers in the dim cabin light. For a moment, the storm outside ceased to exist. I'll take whatever help you're willing to give, he said on any terms. The words settled deep, threading warmth through the cold lodged in her since the night at the bus stop. She nodded once, then opened the door into the falling snow. The storm had only begun, but so had something else fragile, confident, and strong enough to hold its own against the wind. The house felt different that evening, though nothing had changed in its furniture or walls. It was the air charged and restless like a thunderstorm gathering in a clear sky. Dorothy brewed tea in the kitchen, clinking spoons against porcelain, a little louder than necessary, while Ethan and Aaliyah sat across from each other at the dining table. Neither had touched the plates set out between them. "They followed us to Evergreen," Ethan said at last, his voice low. "That means they're willing to cross boundaries I thought they wouldn't touch." "They didn't just follow," Aaliyah replied. "They lingered, waiting, watching. That's not random intimidation. That's the intent." Dorothy carried the teapot over and set it down with a sharp tap. "You two are talking like commentators when what you need is a strategy. You can't just react every time they rattle the fence. They'll keep pushing until the wall gives." Ethan folded his hands, jaw tightening. "I can't risk escalating. The more attention I draw, the more leverage they think they have." "Attention's the only shield you've got," Dorothy countered. "Predators thrive in silence. Shine a light, and they scatter. What you need is evidence. Something that shows the world exactly what these men are doing." Aaliyah sipped her tea, thoughts racing. She's right. They're disciplined. They won't hand you evidence easily. You'll have to make them slip. Ethan's gaze flicked toward her. "Slip how?" She hesitated, then spoke with the measured tone she used at the hospital when explaining risks to families. "Think about what they want. If Blackwell's people are willing to tail us to a care facility, they're searching for a point of weakness, a way to pressure you. They'll expect you to resist, so they'll push harder. The question is what bait would tempt them into acting reckless enough to leave proof." Ethan leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You're suggesting we set a trap?" "Not suggesting," Dorothy said flatly. "Insisting. Otherwise, you'll keep hiding in your house until they decide the game's over." Silence fell for a moment, broken only by the hiss of the heater. Snow tapped lightly against the windows, like a metronome keeping their thoughts aligned. Finally, Ethan spoke. "If we give them bait, it has to be credible, something they'd risk exposure for." "Your technology," Aaliyah said quietly. He blinked. "Too dangerous. If they got their hands on it." "Not the real thing," she cut in. "A decoy. You build systems right, then build something that looks real enough to them, but is traceable. A prototype they believe is genuine, but designed to catch them when they try to steal it." Ethan studied her surprise, softening the lines of his face. "You're thinking like a strategist," she replied, like someone who's seen what happens when bad actors exploit weakness. "In medicine, the first rule is to anticipate complications before they happen. You don't wait until the patient crashes. You prepare for the crash you know is coming." Dorothy tapped her mug with a fingernail. "And when they take the bait, you ensure the authorities are watching." Ethan's gaze shifted between the two women. "This isn't what I expected when I stopped at that bus stop." "Life rarely gives us what we expect," Dorothy said dryly. Aaliyah reached for the pot, refilled her cup, and spoke with a steadiness she didn't entirely feel. "The question isn't whether they'll come after you again. The question is whether you'll still be unprepared when they do." Ethan exhaled slowly, his decision forming like ice crystallizing in water. "All right. I'll call Detective Chen in the morning. If we set a trap, we'll do it with her oversight. But you both need to understand this could get dangerous." Dorothy raised an eyebrow. "Did we overlook that already?" The three of them ate then, though the food had cooled. Conversation shifted briefly to lighter things, the weather. Dorothy's disdain for Ethan's two neat kitchen drawers, but the undercurrent never eased. Later that night, after Dorothy retired upstairs, Aaliyah found Ethan in the study. The room was dim, lit only by the desk lamp. He sat with blueprints and notes scattered across the surface, his expression focused but weary. She said, "You don't have to shoulder this alone," from the doorway. He looked up, startled. "I'm used to it." "That could be the problem." She stepped closer, resting her hand lightly on the desk. You keep building walls, but sometimes walls trap as much as they protect. His eyes searched hers, as though weighing the truth of her words. And what do you suggest instead? Partnership, she said. Let people in. Let us in. For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut but not brittle. Then he nodded once, an acknowledgement heavier than any vow. The following morning, Ethan's security company delivered a dossier timestamp surveillance photos, patterns of vehicles circling the block. One image froze Aaliyah in place. A man in maintenance coveralls, lingering near Evergreen's side entrance. His face turned toward Robert's room. That's the same uniform I saw yesterday, she whispered. Ethan swore under his breath. They're probing the facility and testing for soft spots. Then we don't have much time, Dorothy said grimly. Set your trap before they set theirs. Ethan reached for his phone and dialed Detective Chen. As the call connected, Aaliyah moved to the window. Across the street, the sedan was back parked beneath the bare branches of a maple tree. The driver sat still as stone a shadow behind glass. She folded her arms against the chill that wasn't from the winter air. The storm had gathered. It was only a matter of time before it broke. Detective Chen's office smelled faintly of strong coffee and paper. She spread photographs across the desk plates from the black sedan, blurred images of men in coveralls at evergreen logs from Ethan's security team, and tapped a pen against the table as she studied the evidence. They're tightening the noose, she said, which means they're confident you'll break. But you won't. Not if we turn this around. What do you suggest? Ethan asked, seated across from her. His posture was calm, but his eyes gave away the weight of the decision. We give them what they want, Chen replied, or what they think they want. A meeting, a chance to corner you. But you'll be wired, and we'll be watching. If they make a threat or attempt anything illegal, we catch it on record. Dorothy let out a short laugh. Invite the wolves into the pen and hope they don't bite too hard. They'll bite, Chen said. The point is to catch them in the act. Aaliyah sat forward. What's to stop them from trying something violent? Location, Chen answered. Public, visible, crowded. We'll position surveillance so they won't realize they're surrounded. She slid a folder across the desk. The downtown Marriott. They'll think you're giving in just enough to hear their final offer. My team will be in place. Ethan considered the folder and closed it carefully. If we do this, they'll know it's their last chance. Desperate men don't always stay polite. That's why we'll be there, Chen said. Dorothy folded her arms. And what about her? She jerked her chin toward Aaliyah. Do you plan to let her sit at home and twiddle her thumbs while this continues? Before Chen could answer, Aaliyah spoke. I want to be there. Ethan turned immediately. Absolutely not. I wouldn't be in the room, Aaliyah said, steady. I'd stay in the lobby. But I can't sit here and wonder if you'll walk back alive. And if something goes wrong, you'll need someone who knows the whole picture. Chen regarded her thoughtfully. It might not be a bad idea. If anything looks off, another pair of eyes could make the difference. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but Dorothy cut in. Let the girl go. You two may not see it, but she's sharper than half the suits you'll face. And she's already proven she spots things others miss. Ethan met Aaliyah's gaze, jaw tight. Lobby only. If anything feels wrong, you leave. I promise, she said. The plan was set. The Marriott lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and glass chandeliers, bustling with travelers, rolling suitcases, and families checking in. Aaliyah settled into a corner of the coffee shop, a steaming mug in front of her, and a clear line of sight to the restaurant entrance, where Ethan was led to a table. Detective Chen's team blended into the scenery, one man in a business suit scrolling his phone, another disguised as a bellhop near the elevators, a woman reading a newspaper by the fireplace. They were just part of the hotel's hum to the casual observer. Across the restaurant, two men in expensive suits waited at a corner booth. They rose slightly as Ethan approached, then motioned him to sit. The conversation began quietly, all handshakes and formal smiles. Aaliyah kept her focus steady, but a prickle worked along the back of her neck. Something in the air didn't sit right. Movement caught her eye. A man in a hotel uniform, white shirt, black vest towel over one arm, emerged from behind the bar carrying a tray. His steps were too deliberate, his gaze too focused. She remembered the man at Evergreen in coveralls, the same taut attention disguised as routine. Her chest tightened. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to Chen, suspicious. Fake staff. Approaching the table. From her peripheral vision, she saw Chen's disguised agents shift subtly, eyes sharpening, bodies angling toward the restaurant. The server neared Ethan's table, hand sliding beneath the tray. Aaliyah's pulse spiked. They weren't moving fast enough. Without thinking, she stood across the lobby and called out loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Excuse me, Ethan. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's an urgent call for you." Heads turned. The two men in suits looked up, irritation flashing across their faces. Ethan blinked, confused for half a heartbeat, but he caught on quickly. He rose, smoothly nodding. "Of course. Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me." The fake server froze, his hands still under the tray. Then chaos erupted. Chen's team surged forward, badges flashing. "Police. Nobody move." The server tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. One officer pinned his arm, yanking a syringe from his grip. The liquid inside glimmered faintly under the chandelier light. Other agents restrained the two Blackwell representatives, who shouted protests about legality and entrapment. Guests scrambled from tables and staff ducked behind the bar. In less than 2 minutes, the room was secure. Chen held up the syringe, her expression grim. Sedative. Potent. "They planned to incapacitate you, make it look like a medical collapse." And then Ethan asked, "Transport you somewhere under their control. Force your signature, maybe worse." She turned to Aaliyah. "You prevented that." If you hadn't spoken up, Ethan's voice was quiet, but steel threaded through it. "She saved my life." The hotel staff worked quickly to usher unsettled guests back to calm. Officers led the restrained men out through a side entrance, their protests drowned beneath flashing cameras from Chen's team recording everything. Aaliyah stood near the restaurant doorway, still holding her untouched coffee cup, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. Ethan crossed to her, his face pale, but his eyes fierce with something more than relief. "You put yourself at risk for me. You were seconds away from being drugged," she said. "What was I supposed to do? Watch? You were supposed to stay safe." "Safe is a myth right now," she replied softly. For a long moment, they stood in the swirl of aftermath, the hum of police radios, the chatter of shaken guests. Then Ethan reached out his hand, finding hers firm but gentle. He said, "I need to tell you something," his voice low enough for her ears alone. She searched his face, reading the truth before he spoke it. "I'm falling in love with you." The world seemed to still, the noise fading to a distant hum. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected the words, "not here now," or in the wake of chaos. And yet the recognition settled in her chest, as if it had been waiting. "The timing's terrible," she whispered. "But so is life. I'm falling in love with you too." This time nothing interrupted them. Ethan leaned closer, and their lips met in a kiss that carried the weight of survival trust and the fragile certainty of something worth fighting for. Detective Chen's office was busier than usual the next morning. A corkboard wall had been overtaken by pinned photos, copies of warrants, and a scatter of printed emails trailed across 2 desks. Her team moved with quiet urgency, phones pressed to ears, folders exchanged like contraband. Syringe on a piece of evidence cloth at the center of it all. Lab confirmed at the center of it all, she said. Fast-acting sedative, enough to render a man unconscious in less than 30 seconds. Combined with alcohol, it would have looked like a heart issue. You never would have made it out of that restaurant. Ethan stood beside the desk, arms crossed. His face betrayed nothing but Aaliyah recognized the tautness in his jaw, the way he tapped one thumb against his elbow, as if controlling a storm inside. Dorothy sat in the corner chair, her expression carved in stone, though her eyes flashed each time Chen spoke. "And the men we took into custody?" Ethan asked. Chen flipped open a folder. "One's already singing. The server, Marcus Webb, is a private investigator for hire. He admitted Blackwell Industries contracted him. The two suit-and-tie negotiators aren't talking yet, but their phones are gold mines. We've already pulled messages tying them to intimidation campaigns against other companies." Dorothy leaned forward. "So it wasn't just you?" Chen nodded. "Not even close. We're uncovering a pattern. Blackwell's been running pressure operations for years. They find a target, apply intimidation, sabotage reputations, and sometimes even stalk family members. Enough to make smaller firms fold and sell at a fraction of their value. Callahan Technologies is just their biggest prize yet." Aaliyah swallowed hard. "And now you can prove it." "We're close," Chen said. "But there's one problem. The executives we arrested aren't the decision makers. They'll cut deals, hand us scraps. But the man we need, the one running this campaign, is Richard Blackwell himself. And he's too insulated. No messages, no signatures, nothing that ties him directly." "So how do you get him?" Ethan asked. Chen's eyes narrowed. "We lure him out." The hotel sting rattled them. "Blackwell will want to put this fire out personally. If we push just right, we can make him reveal himself." Dorothy crossed her arms. "Sounds like you're planning another trap." Chen smiled grimly. "This time we'll set it higher. We'll let him think Ethan's ready to negotiate finally. We'll bait him into showing his hand in a controlled environment." Ethan considered this, then shook his head. "That's too dangerous. If they tried to drug me in a public restaurant, what do you think they'll do when they know the stakes are life or death?" "That's why we'll be prepared," Chen countered. "Surveillance backup tactical teams nearby. But it only works if you're willing to play the part." Silence stretched. The hum of printers and ringing phones filled the gap. Aaliyah looked at Ethan and saw the conflict etched in the set of his shoulders. She thought of Robert at Evergreen and his faint smile when she spoke about Maria. She thought of the black sedan parked across their street, the shadow watching through the glass. "They won't stop," she said quietly. "Not until they think they've broken you. If you don't face them, you'll look over your shoulder for the rest of your life. And so will we." Dorothy nodded, her sharp voice carrying finality. "The girl's right. Better to cut the wolf's throat than keep feeding him scraps." Ethan's eyes met Aaliyah's, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust, yes, but also the awareness that everything could unravel. At last he exhaled. "Fine. We'll do it. But on my terms." The following days blurred with preparation. Chen's team mapped out the meeting like a battlefield. Ethan would meet Blackwell's representatives at a neutral office space downtown, one wired to the ceiling with microphones and cameras. The police would occupy the floor above, disguised as maintenance workers and tenants, with tactical units waiting in the parking garage. Ethan spent nights drafting fake documents, a fabricated prototype proposal, financial charts, technical jargon, layered thick enough to convince any opportunist. Aaliyah watched him from the study door as he worked, lamplight carving shadows along his face. "Is it convincing?" she asked one evening. "It's everything they want to see," he said, sliding a graph across the desk. enough to make them greedy, enough to make them reckless. You're gambling with fire. Maybe he admitted. But fire only respects fire. She stepped closer, laying a hand on his arm. Promise me one thing. What's that? That you won't let pride make you reckless too. His gaze softened, and for a rare moment the mask slipped. You keep me from that, he said. The morning of the meeting arrived under a sky of iron. Snow fell in fine, sharp flakes, dusting the sidewalks and hissing against the SUV's windshield as Ethan drove downtown. Aaliyah sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Dorothy in the back seat, watching the city with narrowed eyes. When they reached the office building, Chen was waiting in the lobby, her team already in place. She pulled Ethan aside. Remember, don't push too hard. Let them talk. Let them threaten. We need their words, not yours. Ethan nodded, slipping the wire under his shirt. Aaliyah caught his hand before he walked away. Be careful. He squeezed gently, holding her gaze. For you, I will. Then he was gone, escorted into the elevator by two plainclothes officers. From the surveillance room upstairs, Aaliyah and Dorothy watched the feed on a bank of monitors. The conference room below was stark and bright, a long table gleaming beneath recessed lights. Ethan sat at one end, papers and folders neatly arranged before him. The door opened. Richard Blackwell himself entered, flanked by two aides. He was taller than photos suggested, broad-shouldered, with silver hair slicked back and a smile that never touched his eyes. So Blackwell said, voice smooth as polished marble. The prodigy finally comes to his senses. Ethan didn't rise. I came to listen. Nothing more. The conversation began civil, almost cordial. Blackwell laid out figures and promises of wealth and stability. Ethan countered with polite skepticism. But as the minutes ticked on, Blackwell's tone shifted. The veneer of civility cracked. You think you can resist forever? He said, leaning forward. We own the courts. We own the press. We've taken down men twice as powerful as you. One word from me and your shareholders scatter like leaves in the wind. Ethan said nothing, only adjusting the stack of papers before him. And if that doesn't work? Blackwell continued, his voice lowering. Accidents happen. Families grieve. Businesses collapse. The world moves on. Aaliyah's stomach tightened. Dorothy muttered, There it is. Chen's eyes glittered. Keep talking, Richard. On the screen, Ethan slid the decoy folder across the table. You want it so badly. There it is, my final proposal. Blackwell reached for it with a hungry smile. Smart boy. You finally learned that resistance is... The doors burst open. Chen's team swarmed the room. Weapons drawn, badges flashing. Richard Blackwell. You are under arrest for conspiracy, corporate espionage, and attempted kidnapping. For the first time, Blackwell's mask slipped. His smile vanished, replaced by raw fury. Does this end with me in cuffs? I own this city? Not anymore, Chen snapped, slapping restraints on his wrists. The feed flickered as officers secured the room. In the surveillance bay, Aaliyah exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Dorothy's hand found hers squeezing tight. Ethan appeared moments later, escorted upstairs. When he stepped into the room, free and unharmed, Aaliyah crossed the space in 3 strides and wrapped her arms around him. It's over, she whispered, relief shaking her voice. He held her close, his words steady against her ear. No, Aaliyah, it's just beginning. But this time, it's ours to write. The trial of Richard Blackwell made headlines for weeks. Every network ran footage of him in handcuffs. Every paper printed exposés about the intimidation campaigns. Business analysts called it the most significant corporate takedown in the state's history. For Ethan, it was vindication. For Aaliyah, it was a breath of freedom. she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The black sedan stopped appearing on their street. The tense weight that had pressed against her chest for weeks lifted, replaced with something fragile and astonishing hope. At Evergreen, Robert's care continued steadily. Some days he remembered Ethan's face. Others he didn't, but he always smiled when Aaliyah entered the room. She read to him, helped him with gentle exercises, and listened as he repeated stories of Maria's laugh or Ethan's childhood escapades. One afternoon, as he dozed in his chair, he opened his eyes clear for a brief, shimmering moment. "You've given my boy a reason to smile again," Robert whispered. "Don't let go of him." Aaliyah's throat tightened, but she smiled back. "I don't plan to." Winter gave way to spring. The city thawed, and so did their lives. One evening, Ethan drove Aaliyah to a park overlooking the skyline. The trees had just begun to bloom, tiny pink and white blossoms quivering in the breeze. They walked along the path until they reached a weathered bench. Ethan said, "This is where my mother used to bring me," glancing at the horizon. "We'd sit here with sandwiches and discuss what kind of life we wanted. She always said the best things came when you least expected them." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box. The moment Aaliyah saw it, her breath caught. "I know everything's happened fast," Ethan said, "but nothing has ever felt clearer to me. You've changed my life, Aaliyah, not just by saving me that night, but by reminding me what it means to trust care and build something worth protecting. I don't want to face another storm without you by my side." He opened the box. Inside, a simple but elegant diamond ring caught the fading sunlight. "Will you marry me?" Tears stung her eyes as she laughed softly. Yes, of course I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when their lips met, the world seemed to exhale around them. The wedding was small, but filled with warmth. Friends, colleagues, and staff from Evergreen gathered in a modest church adorned with flowers from Dorothy's garden. Robert sat proudly in the front row, lucid enough to hold Aaliyah's hands before the ceremony and whisper, "Welcome to the family." Dorothy walked her granddaughter down the aisle, her sharp eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "Your parents would be proud," she whispered as she handed Aaliyah forward. The vows were simple, spoken without hesitation. Ethan promised to stand by her through storms and sunshine. Aaliyah promised to care for him and the people he loved as if they were hers. The church erupted in cheers when the minister declared them husband and wife. Dorothy clapped loudly while Robert wiped his eyes with a folded handkerchief. The reception in Ethan's backyard glowed with string lights and laughter. Robert joined the first dance holding Aaliyah's hands as Ethan guided them in slow circles, for a night time seemed to soften its grip. Later, as the music faded and the guests drifted home, Ethan and Aaliyah sat on the porch steps watching the stars. "Do you ever think about that night at the bus stop?" Ethan asked quietly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I think about how the worst night of my life led me here. To you. To this. Do you believe it was fate?" She leaned her head against his shoulder. "It was a choice. You stopped. I trusted. That's what made everything possible." He kissed her temple, his voice steady. "Then, let's keep choosing. Every day. No matter what comes." And in the stillness of that night, surrounded by family safety and love, Aaliyah knew they would. 6 months later, laughter filled their home. Dorothy tended to her garden, and Robert often visited with Evergreen staff praising his progress. Ethan and Aaliyah were preparing for something neither of them had dared imagine at the beginning of their journey, a family of their own. As they sat together one evening, Aaliyah felt the twins inside her shift, tiny lives promising a future brighter than the past they'd overcome. Ethan placed a hand on her belly, his eyes alight with wonder. "We'll tell them this story someday," he said softly, about how it all started on a frozen night at a bus stop, and how love can find you when you least expect it, Aaliyah added. Exactly. Dear listeners and readers, thank you for staying through Ethan and Aaliyah's journey. Their story reminds us that life's darkest moments sometimes lead to its greatest blessings. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment between them? Do you believe love grows in unexpected places? Would you have trusted Ethan that cold night at the bus stop? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and your insights mean the world to me. And if you want more stories filled with romance, suspense, and second chances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next chapter of love and drama. Like Aaliyah.